All righty, we are back with insider betting. We got UFC Seattle this week. We got little Lakers versus Yankees here. Two bandwagon fans, but he's actually
Yeah.
from LA.
Yeah. I have an excuse. I don't know what yours is, but it's
Yeah,
okay.
I went to New York for 309. That's why. But no, we got UFC Seattle coming up. I'm going to take some of the blame on this, and I know Jesse will as well. Everyone's been talking about how shit this card's going to be, and it's not the best card, don't get me wrong, but for a fight night, actually some decent fights on it. As always, we're not going to cover the prelims because who gives a shit, but the main card looks pretty good. But anyways, Jesse, how you doing, brother?
Good. Yeah. I mean, I contributed to this because I made a post last week about what a disaster this card is. It performed well. Everybody was like agreeing. And then I started looking at the card and I'm like, fuck, Fluffy Hernandez is fighting. Gian Silva is fighting. The main event is great. Like actually a great main event. I don't know. I'm like more stoked about this card than I realized, partly because I'm going to be in Seattle. So now I'm trying to hype myself up for why I should be excited about it. But I don't know. I feel like people are giving this card a little bit of a hard time, to be honest.
100%. But no, it'll be a fun event. I guess I should mention you and Cody Talks Inside Fighting. He's one of our personalities, I guess you could say. He goes live every Saturday and he posts some content. But you guys are both going to be at the event together, which is pretty dope.
Yeah. Cody goes live from the event. Hopefully that goes swimmingly and the building Wi-Fi is all good because that could be a total disaster. But we'll also be getting content, interviews with fighters and stuff like that.
Of course. But anyway, let's go right into it here. First fight of the night, we've got Alonzo Menifield taking on Julius Walker. So as many fights on this card, this fight was never supposed to happen, but with so many of them getting canceled, they made it work for UFC Seattle. To give you some background, Menifield was supposed to fight originally in March on the UK card, and Julius Walker, I think, was supposed to fight on this card against a very small fight. I forget his name. But Julius Walker is making his UFC debut. He's only 6-0 as a professional MMA fighter, and 4 of those fights have been in the last year, and he made his professional debut 2 years ago. So he's super, super fresh to the sport. He does have a win over a former UFC fighter, being Bevan Lewis, and this was in Synergy. It's another promotion outside the UFC. Bevan Lewis, he was not that big. He lost to some people who are recognizable. He lost to Uriah Hall. He lost to Darren Stewart and Trevin Giles. And he beat Daquan Townsend, making him 1-3 in the UFC. And that's about it. But it's still cool that a guy who's only been fighting professionally for 2 years has a win over an ex-UFC fighter. I'll give him some bonus points for that. Menifield, on the other hand, he's 37 years old, which is shocking every time I see him because he looks so much younger, and I always forget how old he actually is. But he's been on a terrible run. He's on a 2-fight losing streak at the moment. He lost to Carlos Alberg and Azamat Murzakanov. But to be fair, like, those guys are good opponents. Like Carlos Alberg, potentially fighting for the championship soon. You know, he's been on a tear, knocking out guys left and right. And Azamat is 14-0, and he was 13-0 when he fought Menifield. So it wasn't necessarily a bad matchup. But anyways, this is just a tough fight to pick because I never want to pick I never want, like, not that I never want to pick like such a big underdog, but sometimes we will. But this guy's making his UFC debut. He's only been a pro for 2 years, and it's just like so hard. And he's coming into this like an underdog, and he wasn't supposed to fight Menifield. This is on short notice. Well, I guess for him, he was in camp anyway, so it's more so short notice for Menifield. But he wasn't supposed to fight such a big opponent so quick off the gate. But I also just struggle picking Menifield because he's 37 years old. He's gone knocked out in his past 2 fights. He was looking pretty good before. He was on a 4-5 win streak, but things changed pretty quick, and we've seen like fighters decline so fast after turning 35 and older. You get 2 knockouts in there. You'd assume one big hit from Julius Walker, and he's done. He's got a 4-inch height advantage. He's got a 5-inch reach advantage. So he's going to be all over that. And there's definitely a chance he catches him, but I just struggle picking Julius Walker. So it's I'm picking Menifield by pettiness, but I'm not confident in the pick at all.
Menifield via pettiness.
Yeah, that's what I got.
Dude, so just before I even get into my take here, so you mentioned that this is a replacement fight or a replacement opponent. Was Menifield? I'm sorry, did you say that he was added to the card last minute?
So Menifield was supposed to fight in London, and
Okay,
then
that's what it was. Yeah, okay.
so then
All
he
right.
decided to fight on this card instead.
Oh, so this is one of 6 fights. I don't know if we mentioned this when we were talking about why this card was a disaster. This is one of 6 fights that has basically been canceled or altered because of injuries or changes made. Like I think Curtis Blades was also supposed to. What a card this would have been with Curtis Blades on it. They had to move that to UFC 313. So so just 6 different fights have moved. This is one of them. Now, in terms of this, I hate the way Menifield has looked in the past couple of fights. I hated his strategy against Carlos Ulberg. I mean, that was just the lowest fight IQ approach you'll ever see. And I don't like saying that about fighters, but I think you'd agree with me. It was a bad strategy what he did in that fight. He just kind of charged at him and got knocked out in like 15 seconds. It was pretty bad. I actually think I love the underdog here simply because if you think about it, I mean, there's all the tape in the world on Menifield. I imagine there's no tape on this Julius Walker guy that Menifield could really look at. I mean, he might study that Bevan Lewis fight that you mentioned, but I don't know. I just feel like when you're an underdog, you're undefeated, you're 25 years old. Menifield's 37. He's got a size advantage, reach advantage, and there's no tape on him. I just feel like Walker has like a pretty big advantage, even though it's obvious that Menifield has gone up against much better quality competition. So, I could just be like a little enamored by the odds here. But what an opportunity for Julius Walker on your UFC debut. You can immediately get just bumped up into the rankings with a win here. You just take the number 15 spot. Yeah. I'll take Walker because I like the odds.
Well, we just saw it happen this weekend.
Yeah.
There was man, what's his face? The heavyweight fight. He just got ranked 15th overall. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
It just happened. I think he was making his debut, or he was like pretty new to the UFC.
What card was it? Was it Apex?
It was this last.
It was the Cannoneer card. Okay, yeah. All right.
Who was it?
It was on the Cannoneer card, right?
Yeah.
I'll look it up while you're
Taliesin Teixeira.
Oh, right. No, yes. Yeah.
So he just got ranked 15. So Julius Walker is looking at the same path here.
Oh, that was just brutal. Oh, that was actually the week before, wasn't it?
You're right. I think yeah.
Because that was in front of a crowd, I believe. Yeah, that was at 312. That was in Sydney. Yeah. He knocked out Tafa.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but he still got into the top 15 after his first fight there.
Yeah, I mean, they have a fun one there.
Yeah. Julius Walker kind of looks like Menifield with a beard, hey? And maybe it's just me, but it's like their eyes, they have like very similar eyes, I find. But I don't know.
Menifield looks younger than Julius Walker to me.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, it's so weird. Anyway, let's go on to the next fight. Jean Silva versus Melsik Baghdasaryan. I love Jean Silva. I think he's fucking sick. I love the fighting nerds. Like I've mentioned this on many different episodes that we've done. I think the fight nerds are just fun to watch. They get the wins. They got a good vibe about them. They're usually all there to support each other, like live at the events. But yeah, to talk about Jean Silva real quick, he is on an 11-fight win streak, and he's 3-0 in the UFC, and with all his fights ending by knockout or TKO. So he's 3-0 in the UFC at the moment. And interesting stat, this is actually the first time in the UFC that Jean Silva is fighting a guy who's coming off of a win. So his 3 knockout wins have all been people who have lost, and then he gave him a second consecutive loss. So something interesting to think about there. Where Melsik is currently 3-1 in the UFC, with his only loss coming to Joshua Kalibau by submission, who has since gone 0-3 after beating Melsik. I think what we're going to see here is a very high-level striking bout. I think that Melsik is potentially the more technical striker and could try to land some shots. I think he's going to have like a lot of forward pressure potentially as well. But I think that although he has the skill to beat Jean Silva, I think the fact that Melsik is coming off of a 2-year layoff and the fact that Jean Silva has been extremely hot, you kind of have to pick Jean. He's he's 5-1, which I think is insane. Like, I don't think he should be a 5-1 favorite, but I do see him getting the win here. But I think it's going to be a much more entertaining fight and a much closer fight potentially than people might expect it to be, just because Melsik can land the shots and do really well there. So something to keep in mind, I guess.
Yeah, this is classic throw Jean Silva in a parlay territory here. The odds are just too ridiculous to really bet outright. Although it's basically even money to bet Jean Silva by TKO. So if you think that he's going to get a finish here, it's a minus 110. So that's not terrible. Especially coming off of what he did to Dober. It seems like there's a lot of different ways that he could get that finish in this fight. Just a side note, John Silva, in his previous organization, I posted a video about this, as one of the most insane fighter introductions you'll ever see. Go look at old videos of John Silva. It's insane. It's so funny. Barking at his opponent, like jumping on the cage like an ape, just wild stuff. So but minus 110 by TKO or knockout. And then there's also, if you want to go double chance, this is just ridiculous, but minus 450 TKO or decision.
What about submission in there?
Submission and TKO is minus 150.
Yeah,
so I think betting on the finish is like kind of even money a little bit here. So
yeah. I've seen a lot of people kind of doubt that Jean Silva is going to take this fight to the ground too much, but I think considering that he's, I believe, Brazilian, and like with that background, I think he's got the potential to. He like out of his, I think he's got 13 wins overall. 14 wins, 11 by KO, 2 by submission, and only 1 decision in there. He does have some sort of submission game. And the fact that Melsik has only lost by submission in his professional career probably will be a little enticing for Jean Silva. So I think there's the potential for him to try to do something and not overdo the striking game. But again, he's just been knocking people out left and right. So I don't know if it actually happened.
Yeah. I mean, and also when you look at Melsik, 5 of his 8 wins are by KO, 0 submissions of his 8 wins. So that says to me the guy does like to stand. So that bodes well for a finish here for Silva. And so, I mean, maybe minus 150 is just enough to just bet a finish outright, submission or KO, because you're just not getting anything else. Maybe you could sprinkle on Melsik here, but like I don't see it, to be honest. I think this is one where I would advise against the sprinkle, just because I think it's so unlikely to happen.
I agree. Feature fight of the night, we got Rob Font taking on Jean Matsumoto. This will also be a fun fight. I'm telling you, there's a lot of fun fights on this card. So Rob Font was supposed to fight Dominic Cruz, another one of these fights that, got canceled. Dominic Cruz actually ended up retiring after re-injuring his shoulder. So we'll see if that retirement stays permanent or not. Sometimes I think it will, just the way he announced it, because I'm sure he would have liked to announce it in the octagon, but that obviously didn't happen. Matsumoto was supposed to fight at UFC 313 versus Chris Gutierrez, but pulled out to fight Rob Font, which is why this fight's actually at a 140-pound catch weight instead of fighting at 135.
Yeah.
So that makes it a little bit more interesting. I think that the reason, like if I was in Jean's shoes and I thought I could beat someone like Rob Font, like this fight makes so much sense to take, like I think Chris Gutierrez would have been potentially like an easier route to victory and he could have like stacked it on, but fighting against a guy like Rob and getting a win, like it put him in the rankings, right? So I think he's very confident that he's able to get the win here, and the risk is worth the reward for him. But long story short, I think that if this fight stays on their feet, Rob Font has a very real chance of winning, like a very real chance of winning. And I think that's what's going to kind of like, we'll see. Cause usually like with the vet and the prospect, you don't really know what the prospect is going to do because they're so new to the sport. You don't know if their IQ is high enough to be able to switch up their strategy to help them get the win here. You don't know if like when they're fighting, if Jean's going to want to take that risk to try to take Rob Font down, but he'll need to do that. And I think that is so important for him to get the win here. Jean's younger. He has great cardio. If he mixes in the takedowns and keep the fight on the ground, I think he's going to beat Rob Font. And I'm going for him. He's 16-0 with 3 knockouts, 6 submissions, and 7 decisions. So he's got like a 50% finish rate. Never lost a fight before. I'm rooting for the young guy here, I think.
Dude, it's crazy. Like, he's 16-0, and I feel like I've not heard much about this guy at all.
Not once in my life. This is my first time.
And
he's still in the UFC, so he's not making a debut or anything.
Right. He has 2 fights since Dana White's Contender Series.
Yeah.
But like Rob Font, man, like this guy's kind of getting a little bit of like a he's entering like what's it called, like prospect killer territory, sort of like Christian Rodriguez. I don't want to compare him to Christian Rodriguez, but what I'm saying is, like, I remember when he fought Adrian Yanez. Adrian Yanez, I believe, was undefeated at the time, or maybe he had a couple of losses. I don't remember, but he was like the boxing heavy, young up and coming prospect, heavy favorite against Rob Font, and Rob Font beat him on the feet, knocked him out. It was like excellent stuff. And then he goes up last week, in his last fight, and he fights Kyler Phillips, who was an undefeated prospect out of the MMA lab, Sean O'Malley's boy. Like, he's like a real rising prospect in the division, and he just beats him unanimous decision, and pretty handily handled it. And I'm thinking about this, and I think I love the odds on Rob Font here, plus 136. He's been up against, like, listen to this murderer's row of guys that he's been up against: Davison Figueiredo, Corey Sandhagen, Yanez, Marlon Chito Vera, Jose Aldo, Cody Garbrandt, Marlon Moraes, Ricky Simone, Sergio Pettis. The list goes on and on and on for Rob Font. Yeah, he's 37, but he looked damn good in his last fight against Kyler Phillips. And I'm sure I'm going to look like a fool when Matsumoto just like subs him in round 2, but like, I like the odds on Font here, and I think I feel pretty comfortable with it, to be honest. I don't know. I just feel like it's going to be, he's got really good fight IQ, and I think that carries him a long way. And I think that'll do well for him against a 25-year-old, upstart.
100%. 100%. Yeah. I think like the one thing that separates, I don't even know. Like, you're right. I think the fight has to go to the ground. Like that's all it is. Like he just clearly outstrikes everyone.
Well, all these. That's how Sandhagen beat Font when Sandhagen tore his shoulder in that fight, right? And everybody was like, "Oh, this is the most boring fight ever." Well, all he did was wrestle him with one arm. You know what I mean? So it's like, and he just wrestled him to the ground for 5 rounds. If you can do that against Rob Font, then like Matsumoto needs to know what the game plan is here. It's take him down, control the fight. Yeah. But if you stand and bang with Rob Font, I think you're doing him a favor.
I agree. Yeah, we'll have to see what the game plan is Saturday night.
Yeah.
Co-main event, we got Brendan Allen taking on Anthony Hernandez. Anthony Fluffy Hernandez, I should say. Mm-hmm. This is a rematch. We were talking about this before we went live. They first fought in the LFA, but this was back in 2018, where Hernandez actually got the win. He won the LFA, the middleweight title there via decision, but that's 7 years ago. Like, they're 2 completely different fighters at this point. They have a feel for each other a little bit, but they have a whole new set of skill sets. But I've been a Fluffy hater in the past, I think, man. I picked Michel Pereira over him, and he made me eat those words. He looked absolutely incredible against Michel Pereira. He dominated him in every aspect, and it was just like you were just waiting for the finish. And then I'm pretty sure it ended by like knockout in like the 5th round or something like that, or by submission in the 5th. But he just looked like he could finish him any round. It was not a good look for Michel Pereira. And so that increased my stock for Anthony Hernandez a ton. I get why people like Brendan Allen. But I don't know, man, something that I saw for Anthony last week, or not last week, but when he last fought, he just really impressed me, and I just don't see him losing. They both have fought really decent opponents, with Brendan Allen probably taking like a slight nudge above, with his most recent fight being against Nasruddin Imavov, who he ended up losing to, and snapping his 7-fight win streak. Where on the other hand, Hernandez is hot right now. He's on a 6-fight win streak. Long story short, I got Hernandez. I think they have a very similar skill set, but I give him the slight advantage when it comes to the ground game, and I think that he's going to be able to make advantage of that.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page here. I think that they are basically in some ways kind of the same fighter.
Yeah.
And they can strike ish, but they really rely heavily on ground and pound to get their finishes from striking, and not a lot of power on the feet, not a lot of like special knockout ability, but incredible grappling skills from both guys. I mean, just high level, the highest level of jiu-jitsu you can get. Incredible, grappling, ground control, all that stuff. But I agree. I give the edge to Hernandez. I mean, he looked special against Michel Pereira. He looked really special against Roman Kopylov too, who I picked to beat Hernandez. And the way he submitted Kopylov was so impressive. And I think that he's also like more marketable than Brendan Allen. I think the UFC wants Anthony Hernandez to win this fight, if I'm being honest, because I just don't see Brendan Allen being like a very somebody the UFC wants to get behind for a potential title shot. Like, it's going to be tough for either of these guys to win this fight and then get a title shot with the way middleweight is right now and how stacked it is. It's just, you got Caio Baralho, you got Nasruddin Imavov, you got Hamzat versus DDP waiting in the wings. It's just, you got Izzy still potentially at any moment. It's like, it's tough, right? These guys are going to have a tough time to get to the title shot. And I think if I were to pick one, I would say Anthony Hernandez is more likely to get the opportunity. Just for the sake of doing it, odds, it's plus 110 for decision for Hernandez, plus 330 for submission.
Yeah.
It's an interesting little sprinkle here. Plus 550 for KO or TKO. If you want to bet finish outright, it's plus 180. So I like decision here. I think that it's basically a 50-50 proposition, but do you think there's any chance of a finish in this fight? Because that's where you're really getting your value if you're picking Hernandez.
Yeah. I don't know.
It's tough to see, isn't it? It's tough to see this fight ending.
Yeah. It's just like when you don't have
Allen. It's a credit to Allen because his defensive grappling is going to be so good too. So like, it's hard to imagine.
Well, that's the thing is like, when you have two of these like super high level grapplers going up against each other, like taking a submit, like this fight ending by submission, unless one of them like fucks up, I don't really see it happening, because you'd have to slip up. And then I just don't see either of these guys with like crazy knockout power to be able to land a couple shots to finish the other guy. So that's kind of where I'm a little hesitant in a sense.
What they say is when two grapplers face each other, that's when you end up seeing a stand-up fight a lot of the time. But like, dude, Brendan Allen, I was at UFC Paris, and he was having a lot of success on the feet with Nasruddin Imavov, who just knocked out Izzy. He was having a lot of success on the feet. A lot of fans were criticizing the fact that he tried to take the fight to the ground. And that's against one of the best strikers in the division. So like, I would say, if one of these guys has a chance in like knocking them out on the feet, I would say it's Allen. But I have trouble.
Well, that's what I'm saying is like, I can see the fight being on the feet. Like I see that vision 100%. They're both grapplers. They're going to just try something new out here, but I just don't see either of them knocking each other out. So I see it going to decision, if that's the case.
So Hernandez by decision feels like the bet then.
Yeah, I got Hernandez by decision, I think. But yeah, his and you know what? Like my worry here by betting on a 3-1 favorite in such a close fight is I'm scared they both have recency bias. Of seeing Anthony Hernandez look so good in his last fight and Brandon Allen just taking a loss, even though he also looked good in it. I think that's like, I'm worried that that's why we're leading Anthony, but
I do think that the odds might be a little bit incorrect, if I'm being honest, just in terms of like maybe Allen's getting slightly disrespected by the odds makers here, because he was on a 8-fight win streak or something like that just before losing to Imavov. 7-fight win streak. So it's like maybe he's getting a little disrespected here. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens Saturday night. But main event, we got Henry Triple C Cejduo taking on Song Yadong. Song Yadong actually had an interview recently saying like, I didn't want to take a year off. Like, I wanted to fight, and the UFC just wouldn't let me fight anyone, which is a very interesting take. But anyway, this will be a fun fight. Henry Cejudo hasn't won a fight since coming back to the UFC. But at the same time, he's fought two of the best bantamweights in the world, being Aljo and Merab. Most people say Aljo is the best bantamweight of all time, and with Merab beating Umar, he's 1 win away from tying. No, he's 2 wins away, I think, from tying Aljo's record of the 4 title defenses, and then he'll be considered the best after. And I think he's going to get there. But with that being said, a lot of people did think he beat Aljo, which I think is important to note. Most people say that it was 2-2 going into the fifth, and they think Cejudo won the fifth, but I think it went the other way around in the fifth round on the judges' scorecard. Song, on the other hand, he's had a year layoff, like I mentioned, and that last fight was against Petr Yan, who he ended up losing against. But Petr Yan, if anybody can beat Merab in the division right now, I see being Petr Yan. He's looked really good recently. So, they've both fought really good opponents. It's interesting because in his peak in 2020, Cejudo was like one of the best champions the UFC has ever seen. He was a two division champion in the flyweight and bantamweight division. He was an Olympic champion, which is where Triple C comes from. And when he left and retired, he left both divisions vacant. He didn't lose the titles. He vacated both of them, leaving the UFC with figuring out what's next in both of these divisions. And then he was like, fuck it, I'm going to unretire. And like, I've been a big advocate of like, that's just a bad decision. You could have left on a high, never fought again, but he's still going after, he's still fighting. He's still trying to work his way back up. And I don't want to pick this fight because I can see Cejudo winning. But like, again, I'm like, my biggest thing is I'm going with age. And I also don't like betting on guys who unretire, especially at his age. So him being 38 years old, Song Yadong being only 27 years old. Like I like going with the younger guy. Like I think the decline, especially in MMA, it's not like other sports. It's like once you start hitting the decline, you go fast, and I think that's where he's at the moment.
Yeah, it's a matter of what is Cejudo fighting for at this point, right? Is he genuinely fighting to get back to being a champion, or does he need money? Because there are rumors out there that like Cejudo needs money, that he's like maybe wasn't as financially set as like he should have been when retiring at one point. I thought he looked great against Merab in the first round. You go back and watch that first round, it's like art in terms of mixed martial arts. It was such a great first round, and I think Cejudo won that round. It was really, really good stuff. And then he just faded very fast, and Merab just did what Merab does and just overwhelmed him and won it dominantly. Song Yadong, this is a guy I think that could knock out literally anybody in the division. He is so dangerous. He's so explosive. I'm not trying to be like racial about this, but he's like Bruce Lee. He's just like an incredible stand-up fighter. He's got like just incredible skills on the feet, and he's so much fun to watch. But I do see what you're saying about like I not wanting to pick it, because I think Cejudo absolutely has like a real path to victory here. And like you said, he's only lost against like the 2 greatest bantamweights of all time. So. But I will say this, if you're Henry Cejudo, winning this fight puts you either into like a money fight against like Sean O'Malley, or, maybe a Corey Sandhagen fight, something like that, like a big contender fight. But losing this fight is a big deal because you're losing to the up and comer, the young guy. It basically ensures that like you kind of got to retire if you can't win this fight, right? Like you have to be done, because if you can't win this fight, what are you really doing? Are you going to keep fighting back in the rankings at 38 years old, a guy that's done it all? It just doesn't make a lot of sense. So there's a lot on the line here for Cejudo to figure out like where he's going. And I think I like Cejudo in this fight, to be honest, because I think that he is, Song Yadong lost to Petr Yan. And I think Cejudo and Yan are sort of on a similar level. Like I think Yan would beat Cejudo if they fought right now, but I could see a situation where Cejudo wins this fight by decision because he has a great first round. And then we have and then that's where Song will sort of pick it up. But I could see it being like split decision win for Cejudo. That's sort of where I see this going. And I don't know. I like the odds on I like plus 225 on a guy that is one of the arguably the greatest combat sports athlete of all time who still wants to fight against a guy that just, hasn't really beaten any of the top guys in this division, So I kind of like it.
Yeah. What I'm going to say is I picked all the favorites so far, and I know I'm for sure getting 2 fights wrong. 2 underdogs are going to win. It's just who's going to be the underdogs that win.
Yeah.
And Cejudo could very likely be one of them.
Yeah. Who does he? I mean, it's really possible. Like, who does he fight if he wins this fight? Because like, he is marketable. Like, he's a lot of fun.
I liked your shot against O'Malley. Like, I think that if O'Malley doesn't get the title fight right away, which he might still, like that hasn't been finalized.
Yeah.
But if he doesn't get the direct rematch for a title, I think O'Malley would look at, if Cejudo gets the win here, I think O'Malley would look at Cejudo as like, oh, this is like a great guy for my resume that I could try to beat. He's obviously got the wrestling background, so he's like, maybe people will like give me some respect for that, and for Cejudo, it'd make a ton of sense because he's like, if I beat O'Malley, I get a title shot.
Yeah, and him and O'Malley have been, chirping at each other back and forth for a few years now. So, like, I think that's a fight that the UFC would love to do, but it would have to be like the co-main event on a pay-per-view because obviously it's not a title fight. So it's like you don't want to put O'Malley on a fight night. So it would have to co-main event a pay-per-view. But I would love for that to happen. I'd love for Triple C to have like one more shot in the sun here because Song Yadong is so young. He's 27. Like this kid's going to be fighting for a title at some point in his career. Like I'd put my life savings on that, to be honest. But I just think that like I would love to see Triple C just have like one more shot, just one more, because he is one of, like, whether you like him or not, he's one of the greatest combat sports athletes ever. And we got to respect those guys.
Totally. Awesome, brother. Okay, well, that's UFC Seattle. We broke it down. Next week is it's not 313 yet. No, there's another fight.
It's Apex. It was supposed to be Royval versus Cop, but Royval has backed out. It's a bad card. It's a weird head. Yeah, it's a weird one.
So we'll be back next week with another shitty card, but the week after we'll be back with a good card. So, but anyways,
it's Cop versus Almabayev.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, Almabayev fought on short notice against Umar Nurmagomedov. Actually took Umar kind of into deep waters in that fight. So he actually is pretty decent. Song Yadong, by the way, if Song wins, I think you should do Umar versus Song. That's what I think you should. I think that'd be an awesome fight.
That'd be a great fight. Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, we'll be back next week. Have a sick time in Seattle, brother. And if anybody wants to film with Jesse and Cody out in Seattle, please hit us up. I think it'd be sick.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people in our IG comments on one of our posts, so hit us up. We'll be there.
Yeah, hell yeah.